News when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow.
We begin this morning with the latest on efforts to end the war in Ukraine. President Trump held a 2-hour phone call yesterday with Russian President Vladimir Putin. He came away from it saying both sides will immediately start negotiations, but possibly without the U.S. The president talked about the call at the White House last night.
I think something's going to happen. It's a very big egos involved, I tell you. Big egos involved. But I think something's going to happen. And if it doesn't, I'd just back away and they're going to have to keep going.
President Trump says the war should have remained a European situation. At the same time, he says he's not ruling out further sanctions on Russia, but he's not giving a timetable for talks. We get more from Bloomberg's Piotr Skolimowski.
Trump described the conversation as excellent. Putin talked about it being frank and constructive. As a matter of fact, what was produced was certain commitment for Russia and Ukraine to present memorandums that will then go up for discussions. But what Trump made clear is that he is effectively stepping away as a broker in the conflict in trying to kind of be a referee in bringing the two sides together.
Bloomberg's Piotr Skolimowski reports President Trump also talked about the Vatican as a possible host for peace negotiations.
Well, now to the latest on the war in the Middle East, Nathan. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel will take over the entire Gaza Strip and the military will carry out a, quote, unprecedented attack on Hamas. The new developments come as the leaders of France, Britain and Canada called on Israel to stop its military operations in Gaza and allow humanitarian aid to enter the territory. Here's British Prime Minister Keir Starmer.
It is a really serious, unacceptable, intolerable situation, and that's why we are working intensely to coordinate with other leaders how we respond to this.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Qatar's Prime Minister says Israel's new Gaza offensive will prevent peace.
Back in Washington, Karen, President Trump is going to be on Capitol Hill later this morning, pressuring Republicans to put differences aside and get behind his big tax and spending cut package. There are plenty of disagreements remaining, including on how much to cut programs like Medicaid and food stamps and how much to raise the state and local tax deduction. But House Speaker Mike Johnson says they're getting there.
This is arguably the largest and most comprehensive piece of legislation that Congress has worked on in probably generations. One of the most in the history of the country. There's a lot of moving parts and a lot of preferences and ideas on how to handle all that.
House Speaker Mike Johnson spoke after a late-night meeting with Republicans from high-tax states. He's still hoping for a vote on the package by the end of this week. We'll hear more from Speaker Johnson tomorrow. He'll sit down with Bloomberg's Henry Horton in Washington. We're going to bring you that conversation live at 9 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg Radio and the Bloomberg podcast page on YouTube.
Nathan, is back to normal this morning for tens of thousands of rail commuters following a strike settlement at New Jersey Transit. And we get the latest with Bloomberg's John Tucker. John, good morning.
And good morning, Karen. And the first scheduled train was number 3806. It left Trenton just before 4 a.m. and headed to Newark and New York Penn Station. Now, this morning is the first time the trains are running in 4 days. After a walkout that started early Friday, New Jersey Transit and the Train Engineers Union reached a tentative agreement on Sunday, but it took at least a day to inspect the tracks and conduct safety checks. On its website this morning, NJ Transit indicates all trains are on time, and if tickets or passes expired during the strike, they will still be honored. State officials had asked commuters to work from home during the strike if their presence in the workplace was not considered essential. And it's now the union's job to go back and brief their members and put the agreement up for ratification. The engineers had already voted down a previous agreement, but New Jersey Governor Murphy said he had a high degree of confidence that the engineers will find the new terms acceptable. In New York, I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, John, thanks. Turning to markets now, futures are lower following yesterday's turnaround on Wall Street. Retail investors helped fuel the S&P 500 to another day of gains. We get more from Bloomberg's Valerie Teitel.
6 straight days of gains for the S&P 500, and we totally shrugged off the Moody's downgrade. I mean, yesterday morning at one point, the S&P was down 1.4% in the futures. It totally reversed that in the afternoon. I think the takeaway was that Moody's, frankly, isn't telling us anything new. We already knew about the interest expense. We already knew about this wide deficit of the U.S. government, and frankly, it just opened up a dip buying opportunity.
Yeah, Bloomberg's Valerie Teitel says individual investors purchased a net $4.1 billion in U.S. stocks through 12:30 p.m. in New York, the largest level ever for that time of day. JP Morgan Chase says it broke the $4 billion threshold by noon for the first time ever.
And that's news when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Karen Moscow.
I'm Nathan Hager, and this is Bloomberg.